In our headlines on this Wednesday afternoon, September 25th, here in South Korea. The latest demographic findings by Statistics Korea show there were 20,601 births in July, up almost 8% on year, owing to the base effect. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, Israel and Hezbollah continue to trade fierce fire as the latter vows to scale and speed up its military mission against the Lebanese militant group. And the violent confrontations between Israel and Hamas, as well as Hezbollah, dominate the stage of this year's annual session of the UN General Assembly in New York this week. We start in the Middle East. Israel remains firmly committed to its intense military campaign against the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah, which in turn has claimed a boundless battle is underway. Our Choi Soo-young has the latest.
Israel has continued Operation Northern Arrows, the airstrikes targeting Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Lebanese Health Ministry said at least 569 people have been killed in 2 days. Israeli military spokesperson Daniel Hagari has stated that Ibrahim Kobaisi, one of Hezbollah's commanders, was killed. He said the commander was responsible for multiple attacks on Israel, including the rocket attacks on the city of Haifa. On Tuesday local time, Israel carried out airstrikes targeting rocket launchers, command centers and weapons storage sites in several areas of southern Lebanon, the eastern Bekaa Valley and the capital Beirut. The Israeli military said it used 2,000 rounds of ammunition to strike about 1,500 terrorist infrastructure targets in 1 day, and that it is continuing the attacks.
We aim for the operation to be short as possible. That's why we're attacking with great force. Our mission, at the end of the day, is to achieve the goals of the war and to return the residents in the north safely to their houses.
Hezbollah is firing back. Hagari said that around 300 rockets were fired towards Israel and 6 civilians and soldiers were lightly injured. Hezbollah-run Al-Manar TV says the group launched rockets targeting an Israeli explosive factory. Hezbollah also claimed to have attacked an Israeli military base using its new Fadi-3 rockets. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Tuesday that Israel will continue its attacks on Hezbollah. During a visit to an Israeli military intelligence base, Netanyahu stated that Israel is at war with Hezbollah, not Lebanon. The international community is working to reduce tensions. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said Lebanon is at the brink and people of the world cannot afford Lebanon to become another Gaza. U.S. President Joe Biden stated full-scale war is not in anyone's interest and a diplomatic solution is still possible. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
Right, and as our Choi Soo-young has mentioned, the world's leaders are gathered in New York for the annual session of the UN General Assembly this week, with war dominating their respective addresses amid violent confrontations in the Middle East and elsewhere. Our Ian Jin reports.
The general debate of the 79th session of this year's annual UN General Assembly opened in its New York headquarters on Tuesday under the theme Leaving No One Behind, Acting Together for the Advancement of Peace, Sustainable Development and Human Dignity for Present and Future Generations. The high-level debate session opened with a grim tone, with urgent calls for action amid armed conflict and humanitarian devastation in Palestine, Ukraine, and Sudan, topics which are expected to top the discussion in this session. Calling on world leaders over the need for change, Secretary General Antonio Guterres said 2024 is the year that half of humanity goes to the polls and all of humanity will be affected. He addressed the conflict in Ukraine as a war spreading with no signs of letting up, with civilians paying the price, and reaffirmed his condemnation of abhorrent acts of terror committed by Hamas, highlighting that more than 200 UN staff have been killed in the conflict in Gaza. With 4 months left in office, U.S. President Joe Biden made his fourth and final speech as U.S. President to the General Assembly on Tuesday. He said that the world is at an inflection point, but that there's always a way forward. Addressing the ongoing global crises, he said the world must not flinch from the horrors of Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel, and warned that the world cannot look away from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He also said that the bloody civil war in Sudan has unleashed one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. Representing regions currently in conflict, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas are both set to speak on Thursday. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will be making his address to the body on Wednesday, which follows his speech at a UN Security Council special meeting on Ukraine on Tuesday. Russia will be represented by Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, with President Vladimir Putin absent from the annual meeting since 2015. World leaders will continue to speak until this year's debate concludes on Monday, September 30th, with South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol set to make his speech on Friday. Yoon, Arirang News.
South Korean ambassador to the U.S. Cho Hyun-dong has raised the possibility of a major provocation by North Korea around the time of the U.S. presidential election in early November, while highlighting the presence of a solid readiness posture by Seoul and Washington. The prospect was shared to reporters in Washington back on Tuesday, with Cho pointing out that Pyongyang had previously engaged in provocations during times of significant political transitions in the U.S. His concern has been echoed by pundits who believe North Korea's recent disclosure of images of its uranium enrichment facility may be a precursor to a major provocation, including a seventh nuclear test. In related news, here in Seoul earlier this week, defense officials and their counterparts from Washington sat down for their regular security-related talks against the backdrop of escalated provocations by Pyongyang. Our correspondent Kim Jung-sil reports.
The 25th Korea-U.S. Integrated Defense Dialogue took place in Seoul from Monday to Tuesday, where senior defense officials from both nations reaffirmed their commitment to strengthening their bilateral security alliance. South Korea's Deputy Minister for National Defense Policy Cho Chang-nae and the U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for East Asia, Anka Lee, discussed growing threats from North Korea. A central focus of the discussions was reinforcing the defense vision of the U.S.-ROK alliance. The vision includes three core objectives: enhancing extended deterrence against the North, modernizing the military alliance through technological cooperation, and expanding security ties with other like-minded nations in the region. Both sides expressed deep concerns over the advancements in North Korea's nuclear and missile programs, including recent space launch attempts. The dialogue also addressed North Korea's continued sending of trash-carrying balloons across the border. The officials condemned these actions, saying they undermine peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. The officials also stressed the importance of a coordinated response to the North's gray zone provocations, which include cyber attacks, electromagnetic warfare, and escalating tensions along the northern limit line, a disputed maritime boundary between the two Koreas. South Korea urged North Korea to respect the NLL's crucial role in maintaining regional peace and stability. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol hosted a banquet on Tuesday for members of the People Power Party. Among those invited were ruling party leader Han Dong-hoon and floor leader Chu Kyung-ho. Han had reportedly been pushing for a separate sit-down with President Yoon to address differences over the administration's medical reform plan. While such a meeting did not take place, the president is believed to have placed priority on Han's preference for meat in the dinner menu as a gesture of goodwill. During the banquet, President Yoon touched upon inter-party interactions with the opposition, as well as the upcoming parliamentary audit and his recent trip to the Czech Republic. The 2024 U.S. presidential election will take place on November 5th, and while the latest polls point to a potential victory for Vice President Kamala Harris, the race looks to be too close for comfort. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
With around 6 weeks to go until the U.S. presidential elections in November, many pundits expect the race to be one of the closest. However, recent election polls show contrasting results, making it even more difficult to predict the outcome of the presidential race. According to the results of a poll conducted by CNN and SSRS from September 19th to the 22nd on 2,074 registered voters across the U.S., Democratic Party candidate Kamala Harris received 48% support, while Republican Party candidate Donald Trump received 47%. However, the lead was much larger in a recent poll conducted by Reuters and Ipsos. The poll conducted on 1,029 people nationwide from September 21st to the 23rd, Harris received 47% support, while Trump received 40%, showing a 7 percentage point lead for the U.S. vice president. With such a tight race, winning key battleground states will be crucial for the candidates. However, even among the 7 battleground states, both Harris and Trump are neck and neck, with many results within the polls' margins of error. A recent poll by the New York Times and Siena College showed Trump with marginal leads in 3 of the 7 contested states, Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina. Harris also leads Trump in 3 states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, while the 2 candidates are tied in Nevada. A total of 94 electoral votes are up for grabs in those 7 battleground states. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The Asian Development Bank has maintained its growth projection for the Korean economy this year at 2.5%. The bank has also kept its outlook for the broader Asia-Pacific region unchanged from its forecast back in July of 5% this year, citing the upcycle of the chip industry and the steady demand for electronics. With regard to South Korea, the bank's forecast of a 2.5% economic expansion for this year stands on par with that by the International Monetary Fund and the Bank of Korea. As for the factors behind the forecast, a global demand for Korean chips and that for its cars. On the demographic front, more babies were born here in Korea in July on year, but pundits are cautioning against optimism, pointing out that the boost is owing to base effect. Our Shin Ha-young explains.
The number of births in South Korea in July rebounded from the previous month. Data from Statistics Korea on Wednesday shows that there were 20,601 births, a 7.9% increase compared to the same month last year. In May, the birth rate increased, but it dropped again in June. An official from the agency mainly attributed the rise in July to a base effect from low birth rates the previous year.
There was a 6.8% on-year decrease in July last year, so this year's increase appears to be larger, suggesting that the growth is partly due to a base effect. The number of births increased in May, dipped slightly in June, but saw a significant rise in July. This is due to a surge in marriages after COVID-19 from August 2022 to March 2023, with the effects leading to more births about 2 years later.
Meanwhile, the number of marriages increased 32.9% on-year to over 18,000, while the number of divorces rose 5.9% on-year to nearly 8,000. The official added that the sharp rise in the number of marriages is a positive sign, as it could lead to more births in the future. The number of deaths also rose 0.4% on-year, but the increase slowed from the previous month due to a base effect from a high number of deaths from the previous year. This brings the natural decline in population to more than 7,600. The official also said that despite the aging population, the mortality rate in July for people aged 65 or above has slightly decreased. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
In other news, next year's budget to bolster youth employment will be expanded to better support a productive, tailored transition into the workforce. Our National Assembly correspondent Lee Si-hoo has details.
To help young South Koreans who belong to socially vulnerable groups, the government and ruling party officials decided on Tuesday to work on revising relevant laws to provide better support. Ministers of Welfare and Employment and leaders of the ruling People Power Party agreed to push for a change to the existing act for the support of vulnerable young people, to foster equal opportunities for those in low-income groups, those who are taking care of family members in need, or those who are socially isolated and staying at home. As part of the effort, they are pushing to expand the employment budget for next year to better address youth unemployment. The plan is to bolster the 2025 budget by 16% compared to this year, to above 2.2 trillion Korean won. The Employment Ministry will use the budget to offer tailored job counseling for over 240,000 students and graduates. Furthermore, they will create a database of graduates to find talented people who are unemployed and help them find work.
The Ministries of Employment and Education will cooperate to discover young people in prolonged unemployment since graduation.
The Ministry of SMEs and Startups plans to share job announcements at 30,000 model small and medium-sized companies with good working environments and launch a special savings deposit program for those working in them. Meanwhile, the ruling party pointed out the need to work on the structural issue over the long term.
The anxiety among the younger generation is no mere personal issue, but a structural problem of our society. We will take the initiative to lead the problem-solving process from the viewpoint of these young people.
Tuesday's announcement followed a recent alarming survey result from Statistics Korea, which found that over 80,000 young people in South Korea had not sought work for at least 3 years since graduation, and instead spent most of their time at home isolated from society. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, on the entertainment front, girl group NMIXX will be the first K-pop act to partake as a panelist at the U.S. Billboard Latin Music Week. Now, the event will be held from October 14th to the 18th at the Fillmore Miami Beach in Florida. NMIXX will attend the event on the 16th to talk about K-pop in the Latin music market. Billboard Latin Music Week is one of the biggest events in the Latin music industry. It celebrates its 35th anniversary this year.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. Tropical Storm John, which made landfall in Mexico's southern Pacific coast on Monday as a Category 3 hurricane, unleashed heavy rains as it moved inland, causing at least 3 deaths, with dangerous levels of flooding expected. By Tuesday morning, the remnants of the storm brought strong winds and dumped heavy rain of over 250 millimeters on parts of Guerrero and Oaxaca, 2 of the poorest states in Mexico. 2 people died after a mudslide buried a house, while a woman was also killed when a wall collapsed on her house, with all 3 deaths reportedly occurring in Guerrero State. The storm made landfall as a Category 3 hurricane with wind speeds of up to 200 kilometers per hour on Monday, raising fears of a repeat of Hurricane Otis last October, which quickly transformed from a tropical storm into a Category 5 hurricane and devastated the coast of Oaxaca to Acapulco. Forecasters predict heavy rain of up to 500 millimeters through Thursday in the region, with a high risk of flash flooding and mudslides. OPEC launched its 2024 World Oil Outlook in Brazil's Rio de Janeiro on Tuesday, where it was met by climate activists staging protests. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries' latest report, published on Tuesday, doubled down on forecasts that global oil demand will continue to grow to 2050. According to the report, world oil consumption is set to increase to some 120.1 million barrels per day by middle of the century, a 20% increase from current figures. Climate protesters were both inside and outside the venue, and when a speech by OPEC Secretary General Haitham Al-Ghais got off to a shaky start with the podium lights turning off and a microphone failure, a protester ran on stage with a banner that read, "Planning Climate Catastrophes," before being escorted out. Outside the event venue in Rio, a small group of Greenpeace activists staged a protest, holding signs and images of environmental damage caused by the oil industry. A private hearing that will determine who gains control of Rupert Murdoch's global publishing and television empire concluded on Monday in a courtroom in Reno, Nevada. According to the New York Times, which obtained copies of sealed court documents, 93-year-old Murdoch is attempting to change the terms of his family's trust, which holds large stakes in News Corp, the owner of Fox News and the Wall Street Journal, so that upon the billionaire's death, the media companies remain under the control of his eldest son, Lachlan Murdoch. But standing in Lachlan's way is an irrevocable trust Murdoch set up during his second divorce, which states that 4 of his eldest children will receive equal shares in the company upon his death. And finally to Qatar, where thousands of teddy bears have gone on display in downtown Doha to pay tribute to children killed in Gaza since the start of the Israel-Hamas conflict. In an exhibition titled Echo of Lost Innocence, 15,000 teddy bears wearing black T-shirts with the message, "I'm not just a number, I'm human with an identity," went on display to raise funds and awareness for the plight of children in Gaza. Local organization Qatar Charity said most of the teddy bears had been sold and 100% of the proceeds will be donated to children in Gaza. The installation is designed by multidisciplinary Lebanese artist Bashir Mohammed and will be on display until September 26th. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. We are having a summer-like afternoon in most parts, with highs going up 3 to 4 degrees higher than norms, rising to the upper 20s after a breezy start. We had sunny skies to begin the day, but more clouds are expected as the day goes on. Jeju and the south coast could even see 5 to 20 millimeters of rainfall in the afternoon, with a slim chance, but still a possibility of drizzle in the capital area. Air quality will be good nationwide all day, and Seoul gets up to 28 degrees, but Gwangju will be topping out at 30 degrees Celsius. Meanwhile, we can expect this year's autumn foliage to arrive 2 to 5 days later than usual due to the prolonged heat wave we've had this summer. And that afternoon heat sticks around through this weekend before a major cool down follows next week. Passing rain is in the forecast for tomorrow in most parts of Korea. Then east of Gangwon-do province will see rain on Friday and into Saturday. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
Right, and that ends our Wednesday afternoon newscast. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, and today we touch upon travel trends among women in recent years. Do stay with us. Thank you for now.